Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Timberlane Regional School Board meeting for Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. I'd like to take a moment of silence for our troops that put themselves in harm's way. Okay, if we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Counselor, if you could take the roll call vote, please.
Brian Boyle.
Here.
Lee Bibby.
Here.
Kim Farah.
Here.
Sheila Rose.
Here.
Sarah Malcolmer.
Here.
Sean O'Neill.
Here.
Kristen Savage. Sue Sherman. Jennifer Silva. Seated at the board table this evening are the superintendent of schools, Dr. Earl Metzler, and student representative, Carla Duffy.
Okay, thank you. And I'll start off with our September 19th minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented, September 19th.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstained? 1, 2, 3, 4 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 abstentions. Okay. We have the non-public ones for September 19th.
Make a motion to approve these minutes. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Call for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And all those abstained. Same 402. Unsealed, so those are in your thing. All right. Mr. Duff?
Good evening, everybody. How are we doing? So we're going to start off with talking about Atkinson Academy. Their students are beginning to spend time reading their children's choice books, which was a program introduced by Terrell Cheney, Hampstead's assistant principal, and over about 1,200 books will be read by the students at Atkinson Academy, and they're all donated books, so that's a very exciting program for them over there. Going on to Danville Elementary, the 5th graders just met their DARE officer, which they'll be conducting the DARE program with, which is a program to inform students about the harm of drugs and alcohol and other bad practices. Pollard School, they have something very exciting that I think is a very good idea in my personal opinion. They have the New Hampshire Kid Governor Program, which is a civic involvement program that's nationally renowned. And kids learn about state government through elections, voting, and they have their own governor elected through a primary process. And it's lined up with Election Day in November, so I think that really connects them to the political process and lets them know how our government works on the state level. And the student receiving the most votes will serve a 1-year term of leadership, and they're going to advocate for the one campaign issue that wins across the state. So I think that's super exciting and interesting for the Pollard 5th graders to take a part in. Sandown North, the staff began training on the next generation science standards, which is talking about not just memorization of facts for the students, but figuring out why things happen. And the training was very successful, and the teachers are now planning their resources and getting phenomena storyline units. So I think that'll be awesome for Sandown North kids. Moving on to Sandown Central, their kindergartners have been learning what it means to have a safe body and be an active listener. This week's keyword was relax. They talked about yoga, and they watched a podcast from Sesame Street with real-life modeling of being an active listener, which is always important to learn at a young age. So I think that's awesome. For the middle school, they had a great month earlier, but tomorrow they will be celebrating Pink and Demon Day. This fundraiser, organized by the Student Senate, will collect funds in support of breast cancer awareness, and students and staff can donate $1 to receive a pink bracelet, and all funds received will be donated to the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Research Foundation. Always good to see our students getting involved in those charitable events at a young age. For the high school, October 10th, we have the AP Art unveiling from 3 to 5 p.m. at the library. Also on October 10th, we have the parent-teacher conferences from 4:30 to 7. October 19th, for sophomores and juniors, PSAT testing is coming up. Get prepared to take those SATs junior and senior year. And for athletics at the high school, the athletic department celebrated its 2019 Hall of Fame ceremony, and they inducted Jessica Sagara Tuttle, Kristen Cobb Sanani, Derek W. Sickle, Lauren Sickle, Christopher Tardif, Donald H. Woodworth. So that was a very exciting night. They had over 140 people in attendance, so obviously that was a successful event. And my final plug for the Bel Airs concert performed at the PAC, that's happening this Sunday, October 6th, and there will be the Vintage Car Show and the Bel Airs concert, so that will be awesome, so we encourage everybody in the community to go and attend. That is all I have for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
All right. We have, the next one is delegates and individuals, which... Quick and sweet. Okay, and we'll move on.
Non-public.
What do you guys want to do? Do you want to do the non-public now, or do you want to do it at the end of our meeting?
I think we can do it at the end. I don't think it's going to take too long here.
No? Is everybody in agreement? And we'll just move on? Okay. Okay, that will be postponed until later in the program here. The next one was, we were going to have a discussion with the budget committee, but with, and I'll take responsibility for this, is we had a miscommunication between myself and the SAU. I'll take full blame for it, that we were going to have the budget committee and discuss, basically have a conversation with the school board and this show where our thought processes are in the budgeting process and where we were looking to go with this, and also hear from the school board, the budget committee as well. The actual invite of that going on out, I was under the impression that the SAU was going to do that, and vice versa. I assumed that on the flip side that they thought I was going to do it, and neither one of us did it. So, but I will take that my issue. I should have made it very clear, and I apologize for that. So with that, we will put that on our future agenda. The October 1st enrollment numbers, which will be our next topic.
This is in everybody's
in your
packets, okay.
Yep.
Annually, we're obligated to report on our enrollment, obviously on October 1st, that's why they call me October 1st enrollment. So in your packets, you have this chart.
Okay.
You take a look, and it's broken down, obviously, by school, by grade, by town.
Okay.
I'm going to ask this, and Kathy knows one of us is going to ask this. TLC.
Right, so they're not broken out by TLC.
Right.
And that's the only anomaly that we've got going. And again, these are unofficial numbers. We collect what we've got in the cache, we send that, we finalize it, we send it to the DOE, and then they certify what our actual October 1 numbers are. And we'll have something a little more formal once they do that. But in the meantime, you're correct, is that because the district program TLC is housed there, that there are.
It's a little different from this, because last year we were able to pull it out.
That's right. So what you have in your left hand is what we are expecting to get once those numbers are
Great.
finalized.
Thank you.
It's just too early to get that.
Okay, thank you.
This is early. So I sent an email to you, I think last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, about the NESDEC numbers. So we get our numbers to them, and so we should be getting something from them. If you read through what they were talking about, I don't know when, we normally like to get them sometime around the second, third week of November, but it sounded like they may not have them out until January. But we got ours in right away. Ours are already in there, correct?
NESDEC? They went out Wednesday.
Yeah, so we got those out to them on the first, so. You know, where we are in the queue, I would imagine we're probably in a good spot if we got them there that quickly.
My hope is that I didn't tell them that there was a rush on it, but I sent it all over. And it's not just collecting the enrollment data. We also have to bring in the numbers that we know about charter schools, or the students who are outplaced, or the homeschooled ones. So there are other numbers that we have to collect from other departments.
That was the only thing that made it a little bit confusing for me this year, because I remember we talked about it last year.
Okay.
And you were like, okay, this is where you pull those numbers out.
Right.
And it was in a different format, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't pull those numbers out this year because it's just not,
Right.
yeah, I was just making sure I was reading it
Okay,
correctly.
and just for those that are at home that don't have this in front of them, I'll just give a quick summary of the respected schools. Sandown Central has 155, Atkinson Academy has 331, Danville has 284, Pollard has 471, Sandown North has 336, Timberlane Middle School has 813, and the high school has 1,100 exactly. There's 3,490 students in the district for all schools.
Give or take.
So which we believe is slightly up, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not sure. As
It
relates
is,
to
it
what
is
we
slightly
thought
up.
would be-
It's, I believe it was 33 or,
Yeah, not-
last year it was 3472.
Yeah, not statistically significant. The only one thing that I'd like to call out on the chart, unless the chair has other things to talk about this, was one of our challenges when we look at staffing, because people always look at the numbers and they try to, I would call your attention, for instance, in Danville, third school over from the left, if you went down to like the first grade number of 32. So you have, everybody follow that? You got 32 students in the first grade. Well, clearly, we don't have one classroom with 32 students in it. So you have two classrooms with 16, and that drives the number down. And so as we look at your suggested class size, obviously we have to stay within that, unless, every now and again, we'll ask you to waive, and we'll go one student over, or we'll add additional supports. But that's the kind of anomaly that makes that challenging, because we don't send students from other schools to Danville. They all go to school in their own town, and that makes that particular piece of staffing challenging. The rest is pretty straightforward, but that was just one where, because I'll occasionally get the question, why is there only, why am I in a class, why does my son or daughter in a class of 25 when they're at school X and another school only has 16? That's the reason. It's just straight math of dividing it by 2 or dividing it by 3 classes. We don't have half classrooms. One of the things that we chose not to do as a district was not to have combined grades, like a 1/2. We kept them clean. The multi-age grades, we kept them very clean. So that's really the only thing that would jump off this page to me. And so when you're looking at the numbers, you can pretty much tell how many classes you have per grade based on what I just said, divide by 2, divide by 3.
Correct.
Yep. The other part about that, the high school and the middle school obviously don't divide up as evenly. Teams in the middle school to some degree, and then high school, it's a program of studies where they select classes. And those numbers are all over the place, from
Correct.
really low to what some would consider high, depending on the course and when it's available. So,
Well, one thing I do see here is interesting at the high school is the number with the four grades from 9th to 12th respectively is 271, 249, 277, and 303. So you have a fluctuation of 50 students. That's considerably, with a 300, is your baseline if you wanted to use. So
just a few years ago, those numbers were like 350 a
Yes.
grade.
Yeah,
You know, so
400, or even 400, you know.
400, man. So you've gone from
Yeah.
like 1,1600 down. So I think we've seen the back end of this stabilize a bit, because if you look at all the way back to grade 6, you see those all in the 250, 270, 262.
Yeah.
And some of our lower grades, it seems to be creeping back up into that 350 range, I think, over time, 10 years from now, perhaps. But that's when you're looking at the NESDEC projections. Those are some of the
Yeah.
things you can take into consideration as we long-term plan. But
No, it's interesting trend lines that you can figure out from stuff.
So when we have the TLC breakout, can we get that?
Sure, yeah, we can have that.
Thank you. That's,
It's interesting because when I was doing some preliminary math, and again, this is before the breakout for the TLC, and Sandown actually had 40 more kids than Plastow. And it had, but again, this is before the breakout, so I don't know how many people from the district go to Sandown, the TLC, and how many are just from Sandown, so it'd be interesting.
that's why I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay? Yep. Okay, we'll move on to budget, first draft, informational. Jeff?
So as you call up Mr. Dowd, I briefly mentioned this last night, I think, in terms of budgeting. You know, I've had the opportunity to meet with all the departments and principals, so the department budgets, staffing, those sorts of things. One thing I can tell you is the common thread is when you get to see the presentations, they're gonna talk about the priorities that they've chosen are directly connected to the strategic plan. You should hear that from each department, from each school. And the numbers are the numbers, and this is just a first go at it. It's really early, so, again, I said this last night, I'm hoping that as we moved it up, that we're gonna have some benefit to having this so early on the back end, because it changed kind of the workflow. But there are some challenges. We don't have the guaranteed maximum rate for insurance yet.
No, we totally understand that, yeah, I mean,
So we made some assumptions, based on trends or whatever, and then, you know, some of the staffing pieces, though, I think, I don't think that 7-week really has an impact on staffing, other than the program of studies. I don't think that was the challenge. I mean, other than that guaranteed maximum rate, I can't think of anything, unless you have, that moving it up, other than the timing, made it challenging. So it's some numbers to start with, and it's all yours, Jeff. Go ahead.
Good evening. So as you know, this is the earliest by 6 weeks that there's been a rolled-up budget. And as a result of that, and as a result of it being in such a preliminary, I'll say preliminary state, I think superintendent spoke to the lack of guaranteed maximum rate, which is the guarantee that we use for budgeting purposes for our health insurance, as well as basic enrollments. We really had departments working on these budgets prior to their real knowledge of how many students there were in our schools. This is most relevant, I think, when we look at the budget now and when the departments are able to do a more accurate assessment, particularly special ed and student services, as we get toward the end of the budget cycle. So typically, that's something that we have an additional 6 weeks to gauge and take a look at, to see what our outside tuitions and the needs of our student populations are. So I do want to bring that to the board's attention, that this is a very, very, very early timeframe for the budget to be presented. In front of you, you have two budget documents. One's on a legal size paper, the other is on just an 8.5 by 11. The 8.5 by 11 is the default budget. The legal size is the operating budget. I would prefer that if we're discussing any of the budgets, that we discuss the budgets either one or the other at any given time. It's very easy to get them very used. You'll see that the operating budget is from the 2019-2020 voted budget of $73,078,000 at $75,406,751 essentially. You'll notice on the last page of the landscape budget, I've removed the bond and bond-related obligations of interest and have supplemented based on, as Dr. Metzler indicated, school board goals, which involve $2 million being spent on maintenance and repair projects. So you'll see that the monies have shifted from that line to the building improvement line, which is line 4600, which is on the top of page 17, and to the site improvement line of 500,000, which is on the bottom of page 16. So I think that was one of the biggest movers in our budget this year. In our budget for the 2021 year, we also have the previously approved Timberlane Teachers Association wage increases, and that's on top of the ones that we've had this year. This year's wage increases were, for some but not all employees, a two-step increase in the current year. So it was a little bit higher than we would normally see, let me just put it that way. So our basis for the 2021 budget is, for many employees, a second step from where they started this year. It's a second step higher from where they started this year. I'm more than happy to discuss any particular areas if you'd like to go function by function and discuss. I'm happy to do that. You also have a sheet, if it would be useful, that is tied to the default budget, and that says 2021 default budget line item detail. And if you were curious as to what those TTA increases are by function and object, now this again is for the default budget, but it demonstrates what those increases are that you would see in the individual function object lines. So when I look at line 100, 1100.112, which is regular education salaries, you'll see that the TTA increase was just over $500,000 in that particular line. You'll see that the line is actually down, and notwithstanding that. So those TTA increases are articulated on that sheet, on that piece of paper. And when you look at the total of what those are, that represents a significant portion of the increase in budget. We do have some specific needs, which I will call out to your attention during the budget. I believe you have separately, and I believe, Kim, you had asked for a budget executive summary on any lines that were higher or lower by a certain threshold. In front of you, you have what we already do for our budget committee, and the format that we've typically used for the budget committee is by building or by department area. So many of the summaries that you're holding that you see now are based not to line up specifically with the report that you see in front of you, but they are set to line up to the actual building report, which you don't have. We're looking at a consolidated budget, but nonetheless, the summaries are there. You also have one that doesn't have a fancy heading on it, which is Timberlane Special Education and Student Services Summary, and that one is separate.
Why don't I see that?
Handed it out later, it was the last document that I put in front of you.
Oh.
Oh, second to the last one, the last one was.
So we have some increases in that line as well. Some are related to general unit increases. And I'm looking at page 2. I'll walk you through some of the larger items. You'll see that other professional services, that's line item 1200, 330, a little up from the middle. Requested is 701,000, voted is 446,900, showing an increase of 254,300. We have a program in the district which is being implemented, which the Director of Special Education and Student Services can talk with you about a little bit more. The idea with that program is that we are hoping to be able to provide the schools with the resources they need for many of our students. Maybe the superintendent would have some insight into it as well. We are hoping that we can use grant funding to pay for the program. So the funding is in the budget, pending, again, we're so early in the process, pending application for that program through a grant. If it is, then we can pull it out and use it through our federal funds without having an impact on the budget. But I did want to call that out, that it was there. Our tuitions private, which is the line 1200, 564, are up 220,000, which is an increase over last year. Of course, we're up against our budget this year. I think it's a relatively conservative number, but hopefully one that we'll be able to work out, particularly with the implementation of a new program, if we're able to keep students in district. So the remainder of the lines, we're not seeing a whole lot. If you look at line generally, line 1300, vocational education. We've had some demand, healthy demand in that program. You can see that the participation in the program and the expenses have gone up. And last year, we weren't sure if that was going to be sustainable. It appears to be more sustainable than ever. That line is at 110,000. Again, that's vocational education 1300.561 on page 3. It's a bit of good news, I guess. I'm just going through, we have some decreases, nothing dramatic. Just any other highlights to point out. I'm over on page 6, just skimming through, and other professional services, 104,000 from requested this year from 8,000 in last year's budget, showing an increase of 96,000, resulting from our need to have certain services brought in that we simply can't find. I believe psychologists, we just can't find in the district, and I believe that is an anticipated need, and it's possible that may change by the time November rolls around, and we'll have a better idea as to where that stands at that time. Similar issue with speech on page 7, line 2152, 330, other professional services, that's up 82,000. Similar situation, and again, that situation may resolve itself with adequate certainty by November or late October in this month, later this month. On page 10, the school board, other school board services line 2319, showing the increase of 100,000 that was requested by the board. And I believe that's it. Really, we getting over to the facility side on page 13, I've included under 2620, 330, an additional 50,000 in other professional services in the event that any of the work that we're looking to undertake as part of that $2 million maintenance plan requires any engineering, studying, anything like that. Similar with the maintenance and repair, I've upped that by 50,000 should anything proposed fall into that account. Fuel oil up 38,000, looking at reasonably predicting where we're going to be well over a year from now. Gearing up at people equipment, we've had a decrease. Transportation, that's a 2,700 series of accounts. Our regular program transportation's up slightly, our special education transportation's down slightly. And we've looked at what the current year rates are by the number of buses we use, by the number of days we would be expecting to bus. This doesn't include any credits that we may receive should a bus not be offered. Can't budget for that, though I budget for full compliance with the contract, which is full service. Computer services line 2840, we have a series of example software is up 12,000 just based on where we're classifying software items, anticipated increases. Group insurance. Now, the difficult thing about group insurance is at this time of the year, we don't have that guaranteed maximum rate, which we use to budget. However, I don't consider ourselves to be yet at a full level of staffing. We have positions that still need to be filled. We also have certain employees who may be new to the district who are in a probationary period. So when I look at what our anticipated exposure is for the year, they aren't eligible to opt into our program for 90 days. So typically I would have a good idea into November what that anticipated demand is going to be. Based on what I do know, based on the anticipated demand for this year, based on reasonable, which I think is about average, for about 6.5% increase, which is probably in line with where our GMR has been in years past. I'm showing that amount anticipated to be $11,185,258, which is an increase of $945,098. And that's in the 2900 series of accounts. I think that that's a number that we'll have a better idea when that guaranteed maximum rate comes out, which is usually mid to late October. And I hope that we'll have a little bit more certainty with respect to what our actual participation in the programs is at that time. Moving on to the last page, we discussed the building improvements going up, the principal and interest on our bond going to zero, which is
That was nice.
a good place to be, yeah, I like that. So I know that you're just looking at the budget for the first time, so certainly if you have any questions, I'm more than happy.
I definitely like the layout that you have of this. I mean, you got a lot of nice information here, and it's good job, Jack.
You remember who requested this when he was on Budget Committee?
Yeah, no, but it's finally coming
Yeah,
into fruition,
yeah.
so I want to acknowledge the effort that was put into this.
Thank you.
It's just that we need new paper that cuts out longer so you can have more information on it. It's one of the bad parts about. But
I get- wait, some
I'm
questions.
sorry.
Yeah, we're ready to fire away over here, you
No,
know?
no, go ahead, Brian.
You want to go ahead, Sheila?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
My initial comments, yeah, I'm glad to see the $2 million, you know, into the buildings. But my first quick look at this thing is I'm looking at insurances. The insurance must be page 16. I'm just looking at the total.
Yep.
So what we spent last year with well, you can call it 17 million, because it's within $38. Call it 17 million, and now we're looking at 19.5 million. So we're budgeting $2.5 million of insurance overall, more than was spent.
Over 2 years.
Okay.
And really, it's in your, so we have, from 18 to 19, we're 300,000 favorable. And I don't believe we had a full year of staffing for everyone that we currently have.
Well, I'm just making that observation, like I said the other night in budget, you know. And the other one that jumped out at me is special ed, which was where? Special ed total. Where are we at? About 800,000 more than we spent, 10. And I know that one, it seems to be tuition, out of school tuition rates can make that number jump.
The 1,200, which
The
was.
beginning 1,200, Brian.
What page were we on?
Two.
Two. It was a total, the number was about 800,000 that was more than we spent.
It's a 1,200 line.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you, yeah, so, yeah, so you spent, it's 900,000 more than you spent, yeah. 10.4 to 9.2. Right?
Yeah.
I know, so.
Yeah.
So just like, I guess,
Million
I'm
24.
looking at big numbers, that's all. When I see, you know, just for your first cut, I'm just looking at big numbers. Superintendent's gonna-
Yep.
Yeah, Brian brought up the 2-year increase in the insurance, so just a real simple math, if you took, just say 5 or 6%, the average has been 7.62% increase in the GMR. So if you compounded, if you just took the number 17 and multiplied it times 1.07, and then multiplied it times 1.07, you'd be at 19 and something. That's that $2.5 million over 2 years.
Yep, GMR though, is that's the maximum rate for that year, which then it comes in less than that, so you actually,
Yeah.
it should be, I mean, both numbers are meaningful, what's your average GMR and what's your
Yeah.
actual
Correct me
increases.
if I'm wrong, was the actual like 5% or something last year?
Yeah,
Something.
5.5.
So, I mean, we're in the ballpark, and so,
Yeah, no,
even if you just said 10%, it's gonna go up,
Well,
yeah.
what I was looking at was just big numbers for first cut, because last Thursday night, I mean, obviously you have, which is nice, 17-page sheet here. broken down with information dating back to 2016, 2017, so you can look at some kind of trends. But I was looking to avoid another $4 million surplus, so you can now see where the big numbers are, because it just, again, the staffing is the staffing. And I looked at I did a quick little, don't have a calculator, but it looks like the teachers' union contract, those are the lines that spread out.
Correct, yeah.
And it comes in pretty much, it comes in under 900,000, comes in pretty much what we thought it was gonna come in at,
Yep.
which is perfect. And so, it's not, obviously, we're not looking, that we haven't been asked to ask any additional programs or anything. So you gotta make sure, your staffing's all set, and we know we have a $2 million we're looking to put in the buildings. Then you get back down to insurances, and then special ed. You have that special that happens on campus, then special ed doesn't happen on campus, which the stuff off campus is expensive. So that's usually the surprise. 2 years ago, there was I think $100,000 surprise.
Well, one of the indicators, that I use, because Jeff and I were having these discussions about staffing and the positions last year that were posted and not filled, and we had that discussion in December, let's hold these positions, let's see, I had a pretty good memory of, and I'm thinking at each position, I'm thinking 100, all in 100 ballpark.
Makes sense.
So if there's 18 of them, there's your 1.8 million, that would be a lot of the surplus. Surplus gets generated from different lines in different years, but clearly the staffing, the open positions, and not having insurance and retirement and all that was, I think, that was a lot of last year's surplus. And Jeff thought, we were talking about it, thought some of those were filled mid-year, and I was like, no, those pretty much stayed open, and that, we don't have that kind of buffer this year in terms of open positions. I think the last time I spoke to Sandy, we were at like 3.6, I think, open. She was recruiting and trying to find, so we'll see where that goes, but you're right, some of these big numbers are somewhat perplexing, and trying to look at what actually was spent and why we budgeted what we budgeted. I think we're getting closer in regards to not having those, and they're pretty easy to explain, I think, when you look at the big numbers.
This is like this sheet on the this is perfect. This is just what you need when you're talking on the default. That's what you have to jump right out at, just see what the increases are, what the decreases are. So it's very nice to have that for your first cut, because that's what you're gonna have to have, period, when you fill out your little form for the state.
So, can I go, this is on the proposed budget, just looking at the 112 line. It's the first page, first line. So we expended 15.2 million in 18-19. The voted budget was 16.57, which means that we expended 1.3 million less than that. Now, there will be a contractual increase if I bring that up by about 600,000 or 700,000. That means that should bring that number up by about 700,000. But I see that after we add all those in, that we're still probably $1 million over here in this line on requested salaries.
I think that, Dr. Metzler, you spoke to what our situation was last year in terms of when positions were filled and when they weren't. The number that you see in front of you in that 1,200 line are the employees that we have, with allowances for, in some cases, extra hours, in some cases, certification type bonuses, longevity. So really, there's not a whole lot in there that's not, that's subject to, unless we don't have positions filled, which last year, quite a few that weren't filled. It is what it is.
Well, last week we got a list of 5 to 6 positions that were not filled and were not anticipated being filled, correct?
3.6 FTE, which I think were 5 positions, because some of them may have been half-time or, the last conversation I had with Sandy, we were at 3.6 in terms of working with principals as far as staffing needs, whether it was enrollment-driven or whether it was program needs or whether it was in special ed, and that was the last we had. Well, last year we had, I'm not sure on exactly on the number. I keep saying 18. I thought when, around December, we were talking 18 positions. Might have been 15. So it was an odd number, I know, 17 or 15. And we had them posted, but we never filled them. So we had quite a few. We had a bigger buffer there. So looking at last year's spend to this year's proposed, you know, I mean, I don't know how close it is in terms of spend rate. It's still a little early, but, you know, we should know what people make for the year.
Oh, no, they're-
So just, yeah, simple
What they
equation,
make, and
right?
then what their increases are going to be, contractual increases are going to be, any other, allowances that we have are in there.
Sheila?
You want me to go first?
No, I said you jumped me. I had my hand up.
Go ahead.
Once again, I'm gonna go back to your line, Brian, the insurance line. Well, there's a reason why I'm going back there. In the last,
The default budget.
For the small one, or maybe not, maybe.
no,
it's the
wait a
old
minute.
one.
This is last year's
All right,
budget.
so good, okay.
I'm comparing. I brought this with me. We had 403, that other
Yes.
employee benefits. Okay, so now we go to your proposed budget this year, and it's 3,000? So what happened to that?
I have not included that number in, this year's budget. Depending on what happens, I'd like to get an idea as to what, the true number last year was about 250,000. And I'd like to see what that number looks like, as we go along before the
You said the
budget
true
cycle
number
ends.
was 2,000?
250,000. So the actual number on that line would have been 250,000.
And we only have 920.
Uh,
$920 came out of that line.
Correct.
So that's where I'm getting confused. So where's the rest of the 250?
It is in the salary lines. So when someone would retire, their whatever they would get when they leave, which we talked about at the last meeting, would have been charged to their salary lines.
Okay. But,
Does
so-
everybody understand that he's pulled that out and put it on a separate line? Where in the past it used to just be paid out of the salary line?
but we're not doing that this year.
It's not
Coming up.
reflected in this budget, no.
It's not in this budget. That's why I'm asking why the change.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Pam?
so just to put this in a very basic form here, we just finished the year in July and spent $69 million. We're now looking at a budget 2 years later, $75 million, which is $6 million more. This board is looking at a budget around $70.5 million. That's what was proposed to the budget committee by this board, wasn't it now?
Yeah, it was.
I think we have a long way to go.
Well, you start early.
On the default budget, on the 4,600 line, in the 4,200 line, you've got 400,000 and 100,000 respectively. Can you explain why that's in there?
Those are the voted amounts from the prior year. And I have no knowledge of a one-time expenditure that those would have been associated with. Therefore, they're in the budget. The 531 is removed. That was a warrant article item.
So the 531 ultimately got added into the voted budget and put under building improvement? That's how
Correct.
that works?
Yep. And then it's offset by revenue from capital reserve.
Another question I have, sorry, jumping back here to the other, on your proposed budget where it says 2018-19 voted, is that the actual voted number, or is that the number after the school board moved money around?
Should be after the school board moved money around. I will double check that though to make sure, because the bottom line number stayed the same.
I don't
I will-
know, and it's not, I'm just wondering if that should be the number that was voted as opposed to the number that the school board shifted around.
Yeah, I can make it
Because
that.
that was a default number that was voted. I don't know, Brian, what do you think?
But you're,
That was the voted budget. I just worry that this is kind of a misnomer if you're saying this is the voted budget, but
Right.
it wasn't really the voted budget, it was the budget after the school board moved money around from the voted budget. That's,
And that's,
you're taking the budget that passed.
no, I'm looking at the 18-19 voted, not
Last year's.
19-20. I'm going back 2 years here.
Yes, okay.
I just want to make sure that when I'm looking at the 18-19 voted, that is that the voted budget, or is that the budget?
with your transfers.
With the
Yeah,
transfers,
let me just double check that.
71,870?
Yeah,
correct.
the bottom line didn't
It
change.
rings a bell. I mean,
No, it's not that. It's when that budget passed, there was a huge number of line transfers made. So like, say this first line, was this the actual number that was voted? Or is this the number after the school board adjusted all the lines?
oh, okay, I see what you mean now. I would think it should reflect what the board decided to move it around, because we did that very quickly right after town meeting, or district meeting. and
See, I
we-
disagree. That wasn't the voted number. Why would you not put the voted number in there? Well, anyway, we don't
The
really know
voted
what
number is
number
one
it is right
number.
now. Huh?
The vote number is a bottom line number.
Yeah.
Kim, I think just for people, just to explain, because, you want me to say how I think I understand? If you move money into a line and then you move the line over for the next year's default budget, it matters whether it was the voted by the public or the moved around money by the board. That's what Kim's alluding to.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying? So if you took $500,000 and put it in a line, took it from a line that wouldn't have been moved over, and now it's in a line that it would have an impact on the default, and vice versa.
That's a valid point.
So what is the preference of the board then? Because when I look at voted, only in the case of the default budget, the voted budget, subject to that one-time allocation, reallocation, apportionment by the board as allowed by statute, in the sense that can be your voted budget. I mean, that's up to you. If you want to have the strict voted budget, I can list and make sure that that's the number that's in there, or I can have the voted budget with school board adjustments as well. But even that is somewhat misleading, because is that school board adjustments just in relation to that one-time transfer that was allowed, or is that school board transfers throughout the year? And, whatever is your pleasure. Typically, the voted budget with the initial school board transfer would be a better reflection of your budget actuals.
Okay, I'm just asking which number it
Yeah,
is right
which
now.
one?
I haven't made a decision which one I want. I'm just kind of want to know which one I'm looking
Yeah.
at.
That's the voted, and I'll just double check to make sure we did not include.
If we call it the voted, right, the voted is what the public voted on. If we call it the school board budget, that's the budget after you made adjustments. I don't think we can call it the voted if it's not really the voted. And that's the number we're supposed to use.
Yeah, it's
Calculating.
the voted dollar amount, the bottom line.
This is- yeah.
How do you take that and divvy it up into the hundreds of line items? Is still gonna be the same bottom number, it's just that where you
Because that's all the
positioned it.
voters are. The voters are a bottom number.
I understand that, but with the heat we took on the default budget lines by line, I want to know which number I'm looking at.
We have to be careful. Yes, we
That
have
wouldn't
to,
matter, because last year we had the operating budget
I'm looking
approved.
at the 18-19 voted budget. I'm not
Yep.
looking at 19-20. I want to know what the 18-19 number is. Is this the number
Oh,
that came off the default budget, or is this the number after we moved money around? That's all. It shouldn't be.
Okay.
I can figure it out. I just thought, I can go look at my own records, but I just thought that maybe Jeff would have that.
because this year's default should be based on what was passed.
Correct, yeah.
Well, which it would be based on the 1920 voted.
Yeah,
We're in a
should be
proposed
pretty simple.
budget.
Yes.
We're in a proposed budget, so it's not, that's a different issue, right?
Correct, for this year. This should be easier.
Sarah?
I just would like to go back to something that Kim just said concerning the 70.5 million that was presented to the Budget Committee. I know I missed last meeting, and I'm looking through the minutes. I don't see a vote by the school board to have Brian bring an official number to the Budget Committee from the school board. I just know we had a very casual conversation where Kim did some quick mental math and came up with a number. So was that an official presentation?
More elaborate than that, but
I mean, a million here. It was not an official, there was no motion, there was no vote. So I'm curious as to who authorized Brian to bring that number to the budget committee as an official, this is what we would like the budget committee to aim for number. Because
Thought
this
there
is
was
the first time we're
consensus.
looking at the numbers.
I believe it was a consensus of the
Yeah.
5 people that were
There was only
here.
5 people here.
I don't see that conversation in the minutes from last time. And the meeting that I was at, there wasn't any consensus. It was just Kim came up with a number. Not everybody agreed, but we
Well,
didn't
stop
give
right there.
Said
What do you mean, nobody just?
I said not
nobody-
everybody agreed with that number, but there was no vote to say, and no request for Brian to bring that number to the budget committee.
Kim presented her thought process. It was here at the table. Nobody seemed to think that it was out of line.
But there was no
Therefore,
directive either.
I can totally understand why Mr. Boyle would bring that to the budget committee.
In the past, we've had a vote and we've had a formal discussion. So I just want to make sure that I understand the process now, that without looking at official numbers and without having information from the business office, we're now moving information forward to the budget committee as a formal recommendation. So if that's the new process, okay, it's just not how it's been done in the past.
That time I left. I wasn't
So-
in Gino's.
That's
No,
all. I'm just looking for
Sarah makes-
clarification.
Sarah, you make a good point. There was no formal vote. It wasn't a rather cavalier calculation. I mean, it may have looked at here, but I had spent some time looking at the budget prior to come up with that number. I'm certainly willing to have discussion and take a formal vote so that when Brian goes back again, that we can say that that's the board's number.
I mean, that's fine. I'd like to have some time to digest this paperwork, this budget, and this information before we do that, because that's been the process in the past where we've had a chance to look at numbers, we've asked questions, come up with a number, and then presented it in a more formalized manner. So even doing it tonight, I feel would be premature, but I just think to respect the process, that it should have been something a little bit more formalized.
I envisioned the process would have a lot of feedback loops, and since we're starting this at the beginning of October, we have multiple iterations to have updates here, bring new information to it. That information is conveyed to Mr. Boyle, who represents us at the budget committee. They will take that under advisement and that to be updated. This is gonna happen multiple times.
I understand that.
Well, apparently,
Well, no,
I
but-
guess you don't, because it's.
Well,
no, excuse me, I do. But the number that was presented to the budget committee was not there was no formality to the process before he brought it forward. So I'm just saying that as we make changes and have more conversation and the budget process develops, we are sure that we're all on the same page, because I was not aware that he was going to be presenting that number to the budget committee after that, what appeared to me a quick calculation, but you did your own research. It's fine. I'm just asking, in the future, we do something a little bit more formalized, that's all.
So how about in 2 weeks, we take a vote as to where we stand on the number?
Absolutely, that's fine. I'm just, yeah, sorry.
well, also, and just so you know, sir, I did say to the budget committee that night, I was pretty clear, it was informal. I said to the budget committee that there was some discussion by the school board and a number of, and then I gave probably 90% of what Kim's analysis was, and it was based on last year's actuals, taking money off for the bond payment, increasing $2 million in the capital, and I came up with a number. And I had, it was pretty general discussion, I felt, with the budget committee, saying, we're looking 70.5, maybe, because maybe a little higher than that, but I was just passing on general conversation. And I let the budget committee know that there was no formal directive, formal vote, it was just a flavor, if you will, for preliminary, where that discussion was that night. So, and that, I agree with Kim, that basically we'll formalize this in a couple of weeks, because obviously that the administration is heard these conversations, so we're seeing big one, money being put into capital, so that's good. So now we just see what we can do and tweak this stuff up and see if there's going to be any further discussion about whether there's one open position or 4 open positions, and see if they need it, whatever. See as this develops there.
Okay,
So-
I appreciate that clarification, because when Kim asked if you had presented the 70.5 million to the budget committee, you said, yes, you did. So,
I did,
I
but
appreciate the
I
clarification.
didn't. I clearly didn't come across like it was a directive, and I think I was pretty clear that there was no formal vote, and it was just a very general discussion.
okay, I appreciate that clarification, because that was, from that back
Yep.
and forth, that's not what it sounded like, so thank you.
Okay.
A question I have regards the status quo in regards to the potential for the administrator's contract. Where are those increases reflected in here or not?
Administrators would not be reflected in there. I believe that is subject to negotiation, if I'm not mistaken. In vote? Just like TSSU, right? I mean, it's,
Well, it's a question, I don't know, because it's a new, they are potentially forming a new union, so you have not included them in here.
correct.
What would we typically have seen for an increase in that line, or those lines?
It's a
Because
number
we're
of
not in the
lines.
same line.
Yeah, it's a number of lines. I'd have to,
3%.
3%, but I don't know what it's an aggregation of lines.
Well, we know what their salaries are, so it's 3% of their
Right.
salaries.
Yep.
Plus benefits.
Right.
Not 3% on their benefits.
No, it's
Just on the
3%.
salary line.
That
Would
was
So
you-
there's no respected increase in this budget for that. That was gonna be the agreement that's gonna be on the voters as a warrant article.
Correct.
So those numbers are being presented as what they currently make this year
Correct.
is the same amount next year, which would be the same amount in both the proposed operating budget and the default budget.
Correct.
But the benefits would be in there. Any increase in health insurance, we have to pay that.
That's true.
Yeah, those are mandated,
Yeah,
those are
yeah,
mandatory.
that's in there.
I think, and I don't know the answer to this. This is a legal question really in a lot of ways. So they have contracts that run through this next budget. In the event that a deal is not negotiated, it'd be status quo, so it would be the same as this year. It would be managed the same as with salary adjustments or not in next year's budget. You follow me? Or they'd have a negotiated deal on the ballot. If there's no negotiated deal to put on the ballot, it'd be status quo. They'd be doing the same thing next year.
I would believe it would stay status quo until a CBA is ratified.
I would think
Yeah,
so.
and I'm not disagreeing with you. I think I'm saying the same thing, but what status quo is a salary adjustment at the end of this year for next year. That's status quo. Status quo doesn't necessarily mean the same money next year. It means that you'd honor the current contract in place until a new contract is negotiated. They have a contract for next year already. That's what makes this that's why it's a legal question. How do we have to negotiate a contract with that unit? And remember, we have a couple anyway, direct reports that aren't necessarily, there's some positions that aren't in the union, so it's not at all or nothing kind of thing. Right? You're probably at 95% of that, whatever that number is, times, and that's like a to be determined, I think.
Okay.
So, I had a question.
Hi, Jill.
And I didn't realize this, so I'm asking this. So in the admin's contract, there's an automatic 3% raise written in their contract?
No, there's a 3% merit pool, and so based on evaluations and performance, so some could be more than that, some could be less than that. Some could
Okay.
It depends. So that's a range, but that.
But what
that-
I'm asking
yeah.
is that is that written in their contract as a guaranteed?
No, it's not. They get salary adjustment. It's not, they don't have next year's salary already written into their
That's what I'm
agreement for next
asking.
year.
So it's
No.
not contractual. It's maybe expected, but it's not
It's a-
physically written out in their contract that
It'd be a reasonable expectation that they get a salary
a
adjustment.
reasonable expectation, but it's not written out in their contract, correct? That's what I'm trying
They
to,
don't have a guaranteed raise in their contract,
like the
no.
TTA has a guaranteed raise on.
No, that's where
such
it's
much.
different. I think,
That's what I'm asking, if
Yeah.
it's in their contract.
no, it's not a guaranteed raise, and you're right. I believe whatever's negotiated as a unit, you'd see
Right.
the number in totality on the budget,
Correct,
and you'd know
correct.
exactly what it is the following year, but it would be, and they'd all get whatever they get, regardless of whether they had a great year or a not so great year. Everyone
Correct.
would get the same raise.
But what I was asking is if individually, if it was written in their contract that, every year they would expect a merit raise, blah, 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 blah. That's what I was asking, if that language is in the contract, because I haven't seen a contract from admins. Do you get what I'm saying? So I
Oh,
don't
no, I
understand
get what you're
the,
saying.
I
I
don't
would say what's
understand the way it
understood is
works.
they'd be evaluated and their salaries would be adjusted accordingly.
It's just
and-
understood, but
And I
it's
wouldn't
not.
overspend the merit pool, whatever that is. I think, if you just apples with apples, I think if I were the board and I were negotiating the contract, I'd expect whatever the merit pool would probably be something, it would be a ballpark in terms of consideration as you're putting together a new deal. Maybe not, but that would be, how much money do we have to negotiate the contract? All right, well, it may be too much, it may be not enough. I don't know. That's a decision the board would make as you negotiate. That's a whole, you negotiate with the whole group at once. That's different.
Like I said, I was just curious. I didn't
Yeah.
know.
And you can, if you follow this, like, so people leave, new people come in, you get breakage. So sometimes they're taking a lower salary, so it's that, there's that merit pool is basically established. And so sometimes some breakage can help you with people that have been here for a long time or not in terms of, how you compensate people for their work moving forward.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
On line 2723, 519, in the default budget,
What page is that again?
it's on page 13.
And Kim, not to get you off track, the 19 voted is the 19 voted. 19 voted is 19 voted.
Okay, so that was what was voted, it's
Correct.
not, thank you, I'm just curious on that.
But you can see where that could really confuse people if they're trying to look back and,
Well, that's
Look
why
at-
it needed to be clarified, because if it weren't that, and then people were comparing it, they'd start saying,
Well-
that wasn't the voted number.
All that said, though, the the expenditure reports that you would receive during that year would reflect the board authorized transfers. So if you were to take this report and compare that to the series of accounts that are on the expenditure reports, you would see probably a different budget number.
Right, I agree, but most people are gonna have the published documents from, say, a
Sure.
year or two back, so
Yeah.
they probably would be more apt to see the voted number than the actual one that's going up to DRA.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I think it'd be better I think we should just leave it as it is. So on that line, you have an increase, but I don't see any other increases in transportation.
We, overall, net, our increases that we're experiencing can be absorbed within those lines. There's no real difference. You'll see, remember on the default budget, it's reported at the functional level. So when you look at the 2700s as a whole, we have net, increase, decrease, but the 4883 is the contractual impact of the vocational program. So that's the only real addition, that's the only real net contractual obligation in the 2700 that would be in addition to what's already there.
Okay, yeah, I know on the the default budget, when it goes up to the state,
Yeah.
it is that way. But as our board was taken to court by Mr. Collins and Mr. Belo, we had to go down below that level. And we had to provide the supporting document for every single line here. So when the what is it? The
DS, MSDS.
the MSDS gets filled out, you're gonna have to, unfortunately, every single line here that has any number is gonna have to have an absolute justification. I mean, this is great that you have this, so that's all gonna have to be, every single line is gonna have to have that.
So any line that you see here that has a change should correlate to the page, to the,
So then the question is, 20, and I understand that it's net, because I'm looking at what the proposed budget is, and I'm also looking at the default budget. The problem is that you have a contractual increase in regular student transportation that you're not reflecting in the default budget, except on the vocational line, but you're not representing it in the regular student.
correct, and I can certainly add that increase in. If you'd like, the goal of this was to look at when it's reported on the MSDS, the 2,700, the net increase is what, $4,800. If I increase regular transportation to match what the precise contractual obligation is there, we'll probably end up with more money than we need.
I understand that, but you didn't go to court on the default budget, and I did. So,
I can switch them.
so
Yeah.
every single, it has to be switched so that if we get taken to court again,
That's a great pickup. That's a good pickup.
that we can show each justification, and you
Yeah.
can't, I understand it's a net, but we've got to show.
Yeah.
We've got to show every line as it changes. And if you're showing a contractual increase for one, you've got to show the contractual increases for all of them. So if you could just look and make sure that that's carried throughout by every line.
I would imagine we would make this an agenda item, and your comfort level, board's comfort level, it would be done exactly how you want it done before we finalize it. Right? At some meeting coming up, default budget, and you go through and,
Yeah.
I mean, you know a lot about this, and so, right?
I agree.
I agree as well.
Did I,
Go ahead.
say something? One thing, trying to keep within the strategic plan, and that's why, when I met with Jeff and I asked him to put that $2 million in, because that's part of your goals, put the $5 million into the, right? So my hope would be that we could avoid, as we try to reduce this number down to whatever the number's going to be, and you decide in the budget committee, that we don't arbitrarily, not we, this board, but the budget committee knows that they're not going to remove money from lines that you're just going to reallocate anyway. Like, I would imagine that's something we've committed to. That's a board goal. It's gonna be $2 million in that to do projects, and obviously the next agenda item is, the building assessment, the needs of the district. So that message is clear to the budget committee. The school board's gonna put money back in that line. So that's not where you should be reducing, right? And so that we're clear on that, because I think if we don't do that, I think we'll be spending a lot of time and energy on, and not wisely, I guess. You follow what I'm saying? So that they don't take money out of lines that you're just gonna repopulate the same numbers anyway.
I don't think the budget committee will take anything out of that capital. I don't think so. I think that the budget committee as a group is completely in agreement that we got to put some money to this place. I don't think that.
And that's not a mystery, because it's a goal.
Yep.
You've voted on it, we've committed to it, it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Because that happens sometimes, right? Another group
Yeah.
looks at it, and they're trying to get a number down to something, and all of a sudden they're taking money out of lines that you've already decided were important lines for the school board. So, that's just one that comes right, because that's a big number, and it's relatively new.
Yep.
I think the logic behind it makes a lot of sense in terms of the bond payment and what that used to be and where that money is now, so, anyway, okay, so I mean, that's out there now, and so hopefully that'll be clear to folks that, there are certain places where, sure, if we need to reduce, but please stay away from these particular lines, because we've committed to, this in part, as far as our strategic plan, so, thank you.
Kim?
And again, going back to this default budget in the 42 and 4600 line, we have got to show that that is not a one-time expense there, and I'm not sure how you show that. How you can leave that money in there.
What page you on?
Maybe the 100,000. I'm on 14.
Okay.
One way to look at that and make that determination or assessment is to review what was attached to that funding in the budget at the time.
And what was attached to that line, do you know?
Pull it up real quick.
No, we can deal with that in a future meeting, but I think, I understand your point.
You understand my point.
Yeah.
We don't need to address it
And
now, but
again,
we've got
so,
to
you know,
find out.
And I can understand, so, we spent
can
the
we-
morning up at Rockingham County,
Yes, more than one morning we spend in Rockingham County.
so anyway.
So, you make it an agenda item. We do our research between now and whenever that happens, and then you have all the things to address, and hopefully, I mean, what would be helpful is something like that, if things jump out at you, if you send that through Sean to Jeff, that so he has the information at his fingertips when he comes in, so he's not trying to find it, right? Yeah.
The budget line, that 4,600 budget line, there are two lines in that budget. One is building renovations district-wide, $400,000. And the other is for the 531, which was voted 3/12/19 PAC wall, warrant article number 4 for the 531. So if the 531's out, if we just look at the 400, it was building renovations district-wide. I believe in the past, we had identified items for that account and maybe filled in a little bit at the end, left some money in there, but in this particular budget, it was not identified for a specific project, like a new field or whatever we'd spend $400,000 on. Food for thought, that's all.
It is, and another question again on the default budget, because again, I spent a lot of time working on the default budget last year. When you look at the 1100-733 line, that shows new equipment. That to me would be a one-time expense in the 2020 budget. It shouldn't be included in the 2021 default budget.
Where are you?
I am on the first page, and I'm
Oh, I
looking
see.
at new
Two-thirds.
equipment,
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
say 1100-733.
Yeah.
So that's.
Again, because we could be hauled into court on this default budget with people that want it lowered as opposed to raised
Right.
this year.
And I think that's going to be something that the board should consider discussing, because in the proposed, and again, here I am jumping back and forth, but that's a unique line. That's the 1100-733. Because a lot of the equipment in there is in relation to our Chromebook program, and we're at near full deployment. So last year, what would have qualified as new, which was part of the technology plan that was approved by the board, is simply now classified as replacement in the operating budget. Now, I don't want to get the two confused, but the point is that the new equipment that was purchased there was purchased pursuant to the board-approved technology plan. Bless you.
Bless you.
And if that is something that, if that's something, I know we're talking about a maintenance plan, if that's along the same lines, it's board-approved, it's just a recurring expenditure, it really comes down to the classification of it. Whether it's new or replacement, it's still part of the board-approved plan, and it is a recurring expense to that, we're just cycling them in, we're spending that money every year.
That's okay, but there should still, at least for us internally, should we get taken to court again, there needs to be a justification as to why we have money in the default budget under a new equipment line.
I think that's,
Even internally.
I think that's a
because-
good idea, and you know what, I can make a note here that says 0, but offer an explanation as to why, right? No change, right? On that
Right,
line? Yeah.
right, on
Perfect.
any new equipment line, because
Yeah,
those
Bless you.
would typically be one-time expenses.
Yep.
And I'm just worried that if we
like
don't
it.
make
like
the
it.
point now, and it's 6 months down the road, and you're looking at it and you go, why didn't we decrease that line?
I like that.
And it can, like, you were inferring is that it can go either way.
But if it's explained,
Explain why it was increased or why it was left in, so it can go both ways.
fantastic, yeah, I like that.
Well, and then you have the same thing on the 733 line, you've got new equipment that's in here.
Oh, that's a 66,360?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, and if that's just part of our recurring, cycle, I can note that. Yeah, I think that's a fine idea, and I'll just note it with a 0.
Well, it would be helpful because, and this is what we ultimately ended up doing when we went to court last year, was we had this budget with all these by line sitting right on this. I think that might be, this, I assume, is in an Excel format.
It's not pretty. And the problem.
I'm just wondering if we could match this into the explanation. You have enough room here to put the explanation so that we could see it together instead of,
I've tried, I actually spent some time.
I don't want you to do it if it's a lot of time.
No, I've spent some time trying to see if I could put comments next to it, and we do have some ability to put notes in, but typically it's attached to the specific account, not the function level summary. However, if this format worked now, to put this into Excel and then just transfer the notes wouldn't be a problem. I just can't carry them forward every time I reprint or regenerate the budget. So that's why I maintain these separately. I did look into it, and even then, the notes that I could put in were under the line. They didn't even look like they went with the line, but we could put them next to it in the final product. I think that's what we did. Did I do something like that last year? Putting these notes, and attaching them to to a file? Or was it separate?
No, I think they were together.
Yeah, and I did this, and if anyone was on the board long enough to remember this type of form, this used to be the default budget. When I first started, I don't know if anyone remembers, this is what the default budget was. It was your last year's increases, decreases, and then your lines. I'm not even sure that there's this much
I
detail.
can guarantee you, we
This
had
was
the
it.
most detailed default budget up at the Department of Education and Department of Revenue
Yeah.
for the entire state.
I was dubious to go back to this form because of that, but I just said, for purposes of
Just
now,
showing where it is.
it's just a little easier, and then when we finalize it, we can get it all in, it would be neater. But this is almost the same form that we used. That was it, though. That was the budget.
All right, does anybody else have anything else? I know we got a lot
Some
of
time to digest
data
it.
to digest, and we got a couple of things to digest.
Yeah, and bear in mind, as we go along, we're going to have some.
Thank you, Jeff,
More
Dr.
certainty on
Metzler and
it.
company, and all the staff that was used to generate this. It was a big effort, but we'll hopefully be enjoying the fruits of this effort as we progress down the road.
We'll have better numbers as we go along, too, so.
Yep.
Is Jeff, are you leaving now?
I wasn't planning on it. no.
Okay. Well, if you were, I was just gonna ask you a quick question and then you could go away.
You can ask
I
me-
didn't know if you
You can ask me a question.
were staying. Thank you for the link.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
That wasn't a question.
Well, it's, all right. I'll make a comment then. Which I didn't really want to do. I got to I printed all 102 pages. I got to page maybe 10 and found my first one. So it's all last year's,
Yeah.
which I expected. It's not correct. So, but
You
thank
found
you
it.
for the link. I appreciate the link.
Right. If
So-
you need more, it does take,
It's going to take a lot to go through it, but I have the paperwork, so I can kind of figure out what's what. So, but thank you.
very good.
Okay. Maintenance, repairs, projects, and documentation.
Oh, this thing. Go ahead.
Everybody got this?
They put it in the packet, yeah.
All right. That's it.
Well, in your, I believe this was at your request. It took quite some time to put this together, and it's a confidential document, but it's the facilities needs assessment. So, it's quite a lengthy document. I don't believe you had it before this evening, right? They just got it.
I actually posted it
Okay,
last
so-
week.
It was
on
up
SharePoint,
online.
So they can
Yes.
start looking at it, understanding that it was confidential, because it does tell you about some weaknesses in some of the buildings, some of the areas.
Mm-hmm.
And
Understand
so
why we
thought
don't
didn't
want that out in the
general
public
public to have
domain?
that out.
Right.
Okay, so.
I got to
site by
page
site.
10 and my eyes started crossing.
Has this been forwarded off to the CIP committee?
Yeah,
Because
that's
they would,
I believe this is our first printing outside of the thumb drive.
okay.
And I don't believe the CIP committee has met in quite some time, correct?
Yeah, but we've seen this at CIP.
Okay.
Did we? When?
From Tom?
I never saw it. Lee mentioned it before the meeting. I knew, Tom showed me a version. I never saw this document presented.
I don't,
Because there's no numbers on it. So this is, as it's printed, it's nice to see the needs, but without dollar value,
right.
we don't know if this, is there $100 million here? You know what I mean? What's the value of this whole thing, you know?
No, that's not.
No, when I started flipping through, and I knew that that would be a place that you may go right away, like, what does this mean in terms of how much to do
Sure.
all of this? I mean,
Sure, but it's, and we have to prioritize it and whatever, with the administration, see what's,
But the dollars are gonna, you know, the cost is gonna figure out how you're gonna prioritize things, because you
let's hope
can't
so, yeah.
do a couple projects that total $4 million that when you only have, you know, 1.5 to 2.
There you go.
It'd be nice if you could do
This is,
that,
but this is, I recall seeing a version of this on Tom's computer when he walked me through this. I remember seeing this. This is what I was referring to. This, I knew he had the spread, I knew he had some version of the spreadsheet. That's what I remember seeing.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We're
I-
gonna discuss this?
well, I didn't know where you wanted to go with this.
Right, it was a board request.
This is a board request to provide this to you, so.
Well, I would think that we should probably have some kind of, I mean, I do agree we're gonna need the numbers in there, and I know it's gonna take, that's an effort on its own, but we're gonna need, some kind of prioritization, say for each facility, and then we could sort of figure out, okay, we got certain dollar amount, we could sprinkle it throughout the district at different facilities, and then once you get to the respective facility, what are the higher priorities at that facility, you know, because they're all gonna be different from one location to the next. So probably a prioritization would be an element. Kim?
I think what has to happen is this needs to be available to the CIP committee. The CIP already has kind of the priorities, and as we've talked, our first year on the board, all of a sudden we needed $1 million in boilers. That's probably our first priority for the first budget cycle, this coming budget cycle. It would be helpful to get that document back. I don't know as I saved it, the one that shows all the boiler needs, because I think that's a priority. You must be around
remember that
somewhere.
document,
Can we find that?
Where-
It was probably posted.
Was it something that the school board had at one
We
point?
had it at one point.
And it would be part of a board packet.
Yeah.
I just,
It
I
was-
just needs
That
to
was-
know what's.
It was brought up to the board a year ago, and there was, I think, I picture about 8 to 10 boilers were on that, I believe.
Right. I'm just trying to remember.
Did he
when
They
year or
had
2
lives
years?
on, they had,
They had all the life expectancy
Yeah,
and the,
you directed us to do that, correct?
Right.
You said, and that was the study on the boilers, because that
Yeah.
was a cold winter.
Yes.
We had some failure.
yeah,
Probably, I
repair.
think, so, right?
you know, if we're gonna start to look at putting $2 million a year into facilities, we need to get a meeting on the CIP, and we need to look at the CIP plan. And somebody's gonna sit down and make some decisions about realistic ideas on this, and I think really, because we're already behind the curve as far as that goes, probably the first thing to look at would be HVAC systems this year, if you're gonna put money into capital. Because we know we have some issues with some of them. And then move on from there. Or keep working on a 5-year. You know, the fields, is that the next priority? And I'm just throwing an idea, maybe HVAC's not the priority, but we did the roofs, so seems to me that's the next.
Are we done with the roofs?
no,
No.
But those are in the CIP.
you'll never be done with the roofs. It's just a
Well,
matter of,
no, I
yeah.
understand that, but, I mean, is there any more in dire need, is what
No,
I'm asking?
no, not that we know of.
Okay, that's,
But we can relook, the CIP has all the roofs out through the next
Right.
5 years, so we really need to have a meeting of the CIP committee and have that committee take the lead and figure out what we're gonna be looking at for
Well-
projects, because we're already in October, so we can't do what, I'm sorry, was done last year and just throw money into the budget and
No.
I don't know what it's for.
Well, I think, I know she can't make it tonight. I was talking to Sue about this last week, and I think we've got to set up a meeting with the CIP. You know, I understand right now, we haven't filled that position yet, for the facilities director nomination, but
We have not.
but even without that, we gotta, I think we should schedule.
We have a person
Right.
that's fulfilled that
Good.
role.
So I think we should get something.
I just want to say, like, how this is currently working in my brief experience as the facilities director, right? So, you know, I've asked principals, I meet with principals and department heads, but, you know, advocate for your buildings. So if there are things in here that absolutely need to be done, I need to know about it. The person that's, you know, Gary Paradise needs to know about it. So what happens, right? So I go to a building and something, like, why is that like that? Why is that, is there a work order in for this? Yeah, there is, and I go back and look, and the work order's been in the system for 6 years, but there's a broken handle on a door or something, right? You can imagine, I don't appreciate that, right? Because somebody's been asking for something to be fixed. Can we fix it? Do we need to go out? That's the next question. And then how much does it cost, if anything, right? What's our capacity to fix it ourselves, and how much is that gonna tie up people? And so then you have this document, how much is that, how much of those kinds of items are in here, and what are the bigger items that should be looked at by the CIP, and that's the prioritization of this whole list of work that needs to be done in our buildings, right? So that's really where we are right now, but I've been encouraging, and we have a lot of new principals, right? So, that, you know, this is, you know, Kathy Deotis, she'll knock the door down to get done, and some of these people are starting to learn, like, oh, I need to advocate for my building, it's okay. Yeah, don't worry about everybody else. Advocate for your building. If there are things that need to get done, we need to know. And if people aren't listening, I need to hear, because I can help direct some of that work from my office. And so, I have to, you know, again, I know I keep throwing plugs for Gary, but Gary's been great about getting out to those buildings and taking care of those things that principals need done.
But what you're referring to, though, is day-to-day maintenance.
Yeah.
What I'm referring to is,
Well, when you read through this, you see some,
I'm sure of that. But I think we have to get this sooner than later, formalize this approximately $2 million plan, because as you make this a formal plan, and then with the conversation of 20 minutes ago, default, but now it's right in your default budget. This is your 2 million, and it's spelled right out. So it's going to happen every single year, and I think we got to get that sooner than later, because we don't really want to get ourselves up until a week before public hearing posting, and we're scrambling trying to.
well, we built the plan a little backwards. The plane was in the air, and we're building, in a sense. Now we have a strategic plan.
Oh, I understand.
Now you're securing the funding. Now we're identifying and prioritizing the needs, and then we're executing. I think we were a little out of sorts in terms of what a logical progression of that work would be.
I think the resurrection of the CIP committee is going to make pretty quick work of this. That's what I think.
And also, based on the timeline of the CIP, and maybe Jeff, you can answer this, March, April last year, those people should have been putting in any new request for CIP. Did that happen?
I'll be frank, we didn't. I'll be frank, we did not have a lot of requests in. A lot of the work that has been requested to be done has been done and has been completed. Things that are on the CIP list for buildings, roofs, anything like that, remain.
Okay, well,
And-
that's good to know.
Yeah.
So people were aware that they should have been putting those in. So there's nothing, if we sit down with the CIP plan as it was done last year, we shouldn't have any big surprise that there's something that
There-
we're missing.
I wouldn't say big surprise, but I think that as our,
But
That's,
maybe. And,
Well-
and this is the difference, right? So there's the things that need to get done, things that we actually, and we've already identified. And then there's the things that I'd like to get done.
Right.
Like, geez, I'd really like this space to be completely different, and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm like, that's not helpful right now. We have a strategic plan, we have needs, we need to get to them. So that's what I mean, we start asking, you're gonna get that. Like, oh, I wanna redo the library, I wanna redo hold on, we have,
well,
you know.
I agree.
I just want to know if there's anything out there that needs to be done as opposed to nice to have done. Like there's, all of a sudden we found out there's another structural problem and it's not in the CIP. That's what I want to know. If there was anything like that came in the spring or that you're aware of. So I think somebody taking a look at the CIP, maybe who's ever acting as facilities, or maybe you send it out to the principals and say, this is what it looks like now, is there some big thing missing? that would probably be helpful before the CIP committee meets.
CIP and facilities from years ago, we'd have those six-figure surprises, and we haven't had them because we've been really on top of resolving, getting ahead of them, keeping ahead of them, and making those projects known. And I'm very pleased with that.
Knock on wood.
Oh,
Because that's all I can picture is
I know,
something
right, yeah.
blowing. It's
Yeah.
like, shh.
So,
That's usually the after the winter conversation. Yeah, that's like-
I mean, because this is helpful for I mean, it's something that district should have anyway, but it's helpful if the CIP is starting to look at a big project, and then we can filter down and see what else is going on, say, in that building, or who else needs that. It would be nice, Jeff, if, when we had the CIP meeting, I don't know if this is, say, an Excel spreadsheet or something that is sortable. For instance, again, you save money if you do things in bulk. So, like the second column right here I'm reading is saying, like, envelope or plumbing. Can we sort this document by that?
Yes.
Because that way, if we're doing plumbing, and we got outside people here doing big, we can look at some of these other plumbing projects and put it all together.
yeah, we had experienced some savings doing that with the roofing
Right.
projects.
So we want to be able to do that here if there's something that's,
And it's not evident on the first page, but if you look and you go on to the third page, I believe, you'll see that there's a range column. So I would suspect that anything that the CIP committee would be looking at would be something that would have a range of 20 to 2025
Right.
as well. So it's nice to be able to pull out, and you'll see a lot of stuff here is listed, no action. It's more of just an inventory, it's there, condition update, But I think that we'd be able to sort on that and then sort on the very, either by building or by a category.
that would be helpful when the CIP is trying to, so if you
Yep.
could have that
Available and ready, yeah?
available, that would be good.
So the ultimate goal out of this, what I would expect would be is that we would have, of this 1.5 to $2 million that we're gonna add to the capital budget, that we should have a list identified of this is what we're going to address with that $2 million within a couple of months. Is that reasonable to expect from everybody? mean,
I don't
from
think
that-
so,
yeah.
especially if we can get those boiler numbers.
2 million goes pretty quickly.
No, I mean, yeah, because when you look at, we haven't done anything, you're catching on up, so yes, it should be easy.
I don't think it's gonna take the CIP committee long to do this, because we have a good start on it.
But it's the prioritization, all that kind of stuff, so, okay. So we'll look at turning in, late November, early December timeframe?
And on the same lines, we have depleted the capital reserve fund. I think the board should be looking at putting a warrant on for 250 to 500,000 to go into that fund, a separate warrant to build that fund back up. Because the only way that fund now gets money is if there's money left over after the budget cycle. We can put up to 250,000. We've been spending the money, which I think is what we should be doing, like, what was it, last year was 38,000, I don't know if anything got put in this year. So that we have a separate warrant to try to build that up, because some of these projects, I still think maybe the fields get done, but I have no idea how much money that is, and that might be way more than 2 million, so you'd need 2 million, plus you might have to pull some money out of there. So when we look at warrants, I think we should add a warrant for between $250,000 and $500,000 to bring that back up, especially now it's being invested, so it shouldn't lose money as we move forward.
I agree. Valid point. Does anybody else have anything on this? On our next topic. Facility director nominations that I know we're going to, that's still in flight. I don't know if you have an update that you want to give relative to that, Dr. Messler?
Yeah, I'm happy to. My hope was, and I apologize, my hope was to have a nomination this evening, but letting the process play out, so they're still going through the applicant, still interviewing and to get those finalists to us, and then we were gonna meet with the finalists, I think Brian, Jeff, and myself, and then have someone to recommend. So my hope is that we'll have that at your next meeting.
Okay.
But in the meantime, again, everything's getting done, and we have somebody that's leading that department, so you know, we just want to make sure we respect the process and not rush it, so that everybody feels like they had some say, and we get the right candidate here before you, so.
Okay. All right, move on to our administrator reports.
Great, administrative report, I'm sorry. Okay, materials in the board packets, so provided in the board packets this evening, I believe this was a request from Dr. Farah. I'm hoping that this was what you were. Okay, so
Thank you.
that's post-employment benefits summary. That was due last week and posted to SharePoint last Friday, and so you have that in your packets. The final version of the school board goals as approved at the last school board meeting, so that has been updated, and that's in your packets. We have a resignation letter from the district clerk, and that's in the correspondence folder,
Yellow folder in front
the yellow
of-
folder in front of Dr. Farah. Also, the chair requested a mosquito-borne illness protocol, so that is also in your packets. I have some action items. These trips have been vetted by the SLT. Information about each trip is included in the board packet, so these are student trips. Can I take them as a group, or would you like to take them individually? I'll read them off quickly, or
Yeah.
unless you want to do them one at a time, and then maybe you take action on all of them at once?
Okay.
Maybe, unless you have questions? And I hope I can
That's
answer. Okay. You have the Yale Model Congress, that's December 5th through 8th, 8 students that need to be excused from school a half-day on December 5th and on December 6th. We have Harvard Model Congress, that's February 20th to the 23rd. There are 16 students that need to be excused from school on February 20th and 21st. Youth and Government, that's March 14th and April 3rd and 4th. There's 20 students that need to be excused from school on April 3rd. And there's the Hawaii trip, which is April 24th through May 1st. 18 students that need to be excused just on April 24th. So I need board action to support those 1, 2, 3, 4 trips, all at the high school.
I'll make the motion to support the trips and the days off.
Okay, motion made, is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Seconded by Brian. Call for vote, all those in favor?
Excellent. On behalf of the high school and the
Who's
people
all
that run
set?
those trips,
1,
thank
2,
you.
3,
All
4,
set.
5. Oh,
Lee's
Lee's out
not
of
here.
one.
5, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a reminder about the NEAS visitation. I know we brought it up last meeting, that the visit to the high school is scheduled from November 17th to the 21st. Visitation includes a session requiring school board participation, which is scheduled for Sunday, November 17th. That's from 12 to 4 at the high school. They will make a presentation to the NEAS team and hold breakout sessions with board members and the superintendent or designee. Lunch will be served. Board members should respond to Kathy Belcher for this special school board session. And you'll get something out to the school board again, or is that it?
Well, I haven't heard from anything, so that's why we put it back in as a reminder. I haven't heard from any of the board members about
I
wanting to
don't
attend.
remember getting an email.
You didn't get an email. We brought it up at the last board meeting.
I brought it up.
And brought it up again today.
Oh,
Remember I said, oh, Sunday. I don't know if you
yeah,
remember.
no, I remember. I have it in my phone already.
Okay. Excellent, so. for
Are you
them-
going? Is that your RSVP?
Yes, that's my RSVP.
Okay.
As long as I get fed, I'll be there.
Excellent.
I do believe there is a luncheon.
When is this?
17th,
November 17th.
Sunday.
Sunday.
It could be a
You had
football
asked if it
game.
was a Patriots game. I think most of the games are late, starting after this week, so.
Okay, there's a big screen there, I guess. It's good priorities down there.
Okay. Finally, we talked a little bit about this last night. Superintendent's goals, the most recent version are in board packets. Hopefully, we can finalize these for the October 16th SAU board meeting. Again, I received a couple of suggestions. I can assure you that the strategic plan is embedded in the work, although you're not going to see it necessarily called out in a goal. I am concerned, I shared this with the chair, I'm concerned about resources as far as actually making that a goal that's my goal. But, and the other piece was another suggestion came through the chair, I don't know if by the chair, to have 3 meetings a year with the TTA and the TSSU, and with executive summaries to talk about what we talked about in terms of action, those things that they needed, and that was fine. Our hope was to be able to do that more than that, but if we nail down 3, that's great. I know we've worked directly with TTA on some issues through Sandy Allaire just recently, so I was thinking about that in terms of an executive summary. Typically, it's things about scheduling and the collective bargaining agreement and making sure that that we both have the same understanding, so that we're not asking to do something that's outside the agreement or things along that line, or it could be other issues, so we typically try to tackle those, and we like to do it once a month, but 3 bigger meetings with executive summaries attached is fine. If there's more than that, that'll just be the process, so I would say the minimum of 3, could be more, but we'll do at least 3, so that was really what I put in there, unless there were other items that you wanted to put, that I didn't have an opportunity to send along yet.
Thank you for adding those.
So if anybody has anything that they want to add, please contact me and I will give that off to Dr. Metzler.
But we have a couple of weeks too, because,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
okay.
fine.
And that's that concludes my administrator's report. I do have is it personnel next?
Okay.
Personnel report, we do have one hire, Danville special education teacher, Suzanne Gantz. So we'd be looking for a motion to support that hire.
I'll make a motion to hire Suzanne Gantz, special ed teacher for Danville.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Now I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Okay, any reports of the school board?
I heard from the State Board of Education today. We are anticipating being on their agenda next Thursday at 9 o'clock up in Concord.
That's the 10th.
The
Thank
10th
you.
at 9. The agenda has not been posted, but I was notified that we would be the first thing on the agenda after the delegates. And I can send out confirmation to the board once that's, once I have the agenda, but it could be as late as Monday before they post their agenda. But I don't anticipate that there'll be any change to the agenda. So I'll be going up there with, I think, Jen Silva. I haven't confirmed it with her. So I'll be representing the withdrawal committee. She will represent the school board. And then Sarah Murdo will go up from, as our legal counsel.
Is everybody in agreement that Jen represents this board at that meeting
Yes.
And can speak for the board.
and can speak
Yes.
for the board?
Do we need to take a
I
vote?
think we should take a
I
motion
think we
for
should
that
take a
and have
vote
it
in
on-
case there's a question. They do, as from what I've been told, there will be a vote right there on the acceptance of the plan.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to appoint Jen Silver as the spokesperson for the school board, the Timberlane Regional School Board, at the withdrawal committee, no, at the DOE
Hearing.
hearing for withdrawal.
Okay,
And any decision-making authority?
And any decision-making authority.
So maybe you want to say that the Timberlane Board authorizes Jen Silva to
Act on their behalf.
act on their behalf for the Board of Education hearing regarding the withdrawal plan.
Kathy, what Kim just said, I make that
Yeah,
motion.
tell me that the Timberlane Regional School Board authorizes Jen
Silva to act on behalf of the board
You have to say that.
She said it much better than
at
I.
the Department of Education withdrawal hearing, or at the Department of Education, what is it, a board meeting? Board meeting regarding the withdrawal plan.
You said it very well. Sorry, it didn't
Is that
come
your
out the way.
motion still?
That is still my motion.
I just wanted to make sure.
No,
Kim
that,
motion.
she just said it a lot nicer than I did.
Second it. Got it.
so Sheila or slash Kim made it.
No,
Sheila
just
made it,
Sheila.
I
I
seconded
made
it.
it.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Excuse me, unanimous, never mind.
Okay, got it.
Okay. That was, anything else that you want to add? Okay.
Policy committee met tonight. It's off to a good start. We got through a lot of policies this evening. Seems to be going well.
I have a committee thing tonight. I received a note from Mrs. Sherman, because Mrs. Sherman is out tonight, and she asked me to speak to the Timberlane Wellness Fair at the Plastow YMCA. Was a huge success. Bloodmobile had 33 donations, very successful, 60 vendors, 360 community sign-ins. Student received community service hour by attending. Staff received PD hours by attending. Evaluation done by the vendors, very positive, great venue, easy parking, they will return. Thanks to the planning committee in the Plastow YMCA. And she also said that this is very positive results, and she was thrilled with this.
Okay, thank you. Brian, anything?
Okay, at budget committee last week, big budgets went over the school board budget. And there was a second budget, wasn't there, Jeff?
Oh, budget committee.
Budget committee's budget, yes, the two big budgets. So those went through very smoother and silk. And then I think, well, I guess I would, a committee report, I guess I should see if I can coordinate something here with Dr. Metzler, because I would like to get something going sooner than later with CIP. So whether, if you can have Gary here, or Jeff, or
Through Kathy.
I'll work with Kathy. 'Cause
Yeah,
I-
and just, she'll find the time.
Perfect.
Next week isn't too bad. Early in the week, or later in the week, I'm pretty,
Well,
earlier in the week, I'm not too bad. Monday,
I told
Tuesday.
Sue a couple of days I would bring it up, so I want to get going on this thing here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sarah?
So we had a curriculum and assessment committee meeting. It was a pretty light agenda. No action was taken because Sue was unable to attend. So it was just some updates on some curriculum revisions, that progress reports. The school year's just started, so, and they had a PD day that day as well. So they were all really pleased with how that professional development day went. We did get the evening division trend. It was just like I said, it was a preliminary discussion, and they do expect to have the final report and be ready to present later this month or early next month. As requested, Mr. Strange just wasn't able to be there, so again, it wasn't an in-depth conversation. One of our goals this year is to, follow the strategic plan. So there were a couple of report outs on some of the progress notes on some of the pieces of the strategic plan. So on 1.1, training educators to implement school-wide flexible approaches that personalize learning for students. There was a small update at the elementary level where they are really beginning to see a strong collaboration between classroom teachers and enrichment teachers to incorporate enrichment for all across all the elementary schools, which they were really excited to share. In regards to the new hybrid model for the report card, 6 through 8 are going to be using the hybrid model this year, and that's where it's the numeric as well as the competency acquisition. So it's that both pieces. Mr. Pedersen and his team are really working to plan out the transition for the high school because they want to make sure that when that is implemented, it is as smooth as possible. So they're working on that. And yeah, that was, like I said, it was a pretty light meeting. So that's that. And then this week is the last couple of days that our German students are going to be at the high school. I've had the pleasure of hosting 2 German students myself in our house, and they've been a delight. They were in Boston today. They went to the dance after Spirit Week. They were at the football game. They're just great kids, and they're just enjoying their time at Timberlane. The 2 boys that we're hosting have made a ton of friends at Timberlane. They've gone over to their house after school. They've gone to sporting events. They've gone to practices. Timberlane has just welcomed all of them into the fold, and it's just so exciting to see. So that's just been a really great experience across the board.
Those are nice programs. I actually was taking notice, Brian and I, when we were dealing with something else, that they actually had the German flag flying up our the flagpole on underneath the American flag. It was nice,
Yeah.
sort of welcoming them.
It's been just great.
Great, Sheila.
Only one more thing. I want to thank committee members for the negotiations for the TSSU.
Actually,
Oh,
it's a nice segue into.
Congratulations. Thank you for the hard work. Thank you for
Yeah, she did an awesome job on that, and
doing a great job on it, and, hopefully it will be ratified and everything will be good.
I actually want to extend, I was dealing with one issue with our attorney, Mr. O'Shaughnessy, and talking about that, he actually got an email, which he forwarded off to me because I wanted to actually read it, because it was, to echo this comment. And this is from Mr. O'Shaughnessy, our district attorney. He says, "I wanted you to see this compliment below from Terry Donovan regarding the negotiation process. I'm currently working with Jeff and Terry to get the CBA documents to you ASAP, and we plan to have that to you by the 10th. In the meantime, I wanted you to see this voluntary and unprompted, and emphasis added, message of appreciation from the union, because it is directed to every member of the negotiating team. It is very rare to see a union express this kind of appreciation following bargaining. We all saw firsthand how the members of the TSSU negotiations team were moved by the level of courtesy and respect you showed them during the past couple of months." And when I went down to here, that, part of Mrs. Donovan's comments was that this was really a great negotiation, not only in terms of results, but the process. I want to thank you very much. So that's a big kudos to the team that was negotiating that and all those involved in that process.
So, thank you for giving up
Yep.
your time and effort. Thank you.
I agree. One of the other things that I had added here was that we, after last night's discussions on several of the matters, is I wanted to reach out to our attorney, because I wanted to make sure that we were all properly with our policies and so forth in the regards to our law firm that this board has negotiated with and selected is Drummond Woodson, and our policy that we have on this, just for school attorney, is before you with the updates that I thought that were relative to this issue, and which should be addressed immediately so that we are all on the same page. And I have the policy before you. What I would like to ask you, and I already discussed this with Mr. O'Shaughnessy, for the process to be involved, is that we'd have to make a motion to adopt this policy, which would require us to waive the first and second readings to make it effective immediately, and that this vote would be a simple majority of this board. And then after that, I'd actually like to
You have to notice policy changes, you can't just make them on the floor.
yes, we can. He's well aware of everything that we could do.
I'm recommending that you don't do it, but that's up to you.
I just want to make sure that
Yep.
it's just the process, that's all. Okay.
Does anybody have the,
The policy.
I didn't bring, I'm not sure
policy?
the policy that, I usually bring my book that has all the policies, and I didn't bring it. There's a policy on
Waiving policies.
waiving policies, and I think you have to have a majority, I think you have to have,
I thought you had to notice it in advance.
You have to notice it in advance, and you have to have
Sometimes-
two-thirds
Yeah,
present.
so let me just
something
look,
like
I
that.
mean,
well, we have 2/3 present.
I have it right here in an email from him.
Suspension
One is the
policy.
motion to adopt
BG.
and amend to policy BDG, which is the one that's before you, and to waive the first and second readings as permitted by policy BGB.
So it's policy BGB.
so waiving a policy,
This vote requires a simple majority of the board.
can I read this out loud?
No, go right ahead.
The board may waive a policy only when all of the following conditions are met. I just remember that this board went through this once before, that's why I'm bringing it
No,
up.
I,
It has nothing to do with the policy itself, just the
no, I agree,
practice.
I'm not sure we can do this, so.
And the first one is the proposed policy to be waived has to be publicly announced to the school board at least 1 week prior to the board's vote. The waiver is for a one-time action by the Board of Administration. The vote is held at a properly noticed meeting, and the majority of the board members present agree. I don't know if the attorney who reviewed that information looked at our policy, or they were just looking at a typical policy.
It's bad advice again, from the same attorney. It's bad advice. I'm recommending against it.
So,
Kathy,
Mark,
can I just
you
see
can-
those?
yeah.
This is what happens to us,
Because-
Sean, every time.
I'm just reading this thing, so what is it we're not doing?
So it's like the policy adoption, so, you know, you could go to that one, but this isn't about, this is like, you're waiving your policy to waive your policy. That's what you'd be doing, you're waiving your policy to waive your policy so that you can make an adoption to a policy that hasn't gone through the policy committee. Well, it doesn't really have to, it is a board policy. I mean, that's a protocol, but it's not required, I don't think it's required in the policy.
Well, it does say though further after, in cases of emergency meetings or justifiable situations where inadequate prior notice was given the board, a majority vote by all board members present is required to waive a policy. Wouldn't that apply? If it were a situation where you needed to do, if it were justifiable, like you had to do it,
The board believes that it's justifiable to change it today and not in 2 weeks.
and not in 2 weeks. So,
Certainly this board.
Could I-
We can go
I'm
into
just-
non-public, I'm gonna tell you, you don't wanna tie your hands with one firm. I have to recommend to this board, you do not wanna tie your hands with one firm.
We wouldn't be tying our hands with one firm. This board would be able to make an adjustments as it sees fit
We
to
have-
any council at any time.
No, we have day-to-day operations that require different firms for different reasons. And it's not the board, it's day-to-day operations. It's not even me, I have special ed stuff, I have other, it's just that, you do what you feel like you need to do. I'm recommending against it for the obvious reasons. But we can go into non-public and go into this some more if you'd like. But I would not tie the board's hands to one firm. I would not do it. I would tell any board that I worked for in any school district that exact same thing.
I think I'm not about to understand it, to tell you the truth.
yeah,
I don't understand what's going on here.
I don't either, so maybe we should go into a non-public.
Okay?
I think that would be a non-public under L, would it not?
There you go.
Well,
We got
this
the
is
other one we gotta come back to
reputation,
anyways.
or this is-
Well, the
it's not-
reputation is not, whose reputation would it be? Is it,
I guess
Could be the law firm.
I don't think so.
Well,
But
well, I think it's better to go in under L, because obviously it was legal advice.
yeah,
So are we done with everything else?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to seek to go into a non-public under,
sure.
You'll have a couple of sessions, I'm assuming, Dr. Messerhead.
Get
Yeah,
right.
there's a couple that were actually posted.
Good tip line
yeah, there's the
on
one, the personnel one, which would be, I'm
Yeah,
assuming
so
C.
we should-
It's
yeah,
two-
so
there's-
We're gonna
just
have to
pick
go-
which one you wanna do first, we should break them out.
So there's gonna be
individuals.
what, 2 Cs and an L?
Oh, no, you can do the 2 Cs under the C, just not the Cs and the L.
Correct. So then we have 2.
it. By a vowel.
It's not even 10 o'clock yet, and I'm
By a
already.
vowel.
I'll make a motion to enter non-public on 91A:3, paragraph 2, section C. We'll do the Cs first,
Second.
and then we'll come out and do the Ls.
Okay?
Mr. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Doobie?
Yes.
Dr. Farah?
Yep.
Ms. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Markamer?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
At 9 o'clock.
Can I see the yellow folder?